infected, people still experienced parasites. They still experienced bacteriophages that killed people very efficiently and quickly. But that's still us dependent on believing how human history was told by Satanists, by the winners of human history. They have this much control. If I'm to believe they have this much control, then they rewrote human history to their advantage, and they want people to believe that all humans on Earth have been thoroughly colonized by them very early in human history, and that bacteriophages killed so many people very efficiently when Western science wasn't a default for how daily life unfolded for any human on Earth, and that livestock animals were mistreated and somehow caused all the nasty bacteria or viruses or filthy living conditions. They want people to believe that all the ills that people experience in modern times were also around hundreds of years ago and were so problematic that we needed to perfect our use of Western science, our systemization of shamanic practices, because that's what Western science is. It's the systemization of shamanic practices. It's like if the quantum computer is actually an analogy of shamanic practices being recreated at a mass scale and being applied in rapidly, in a mass scale, being applied in such a huge, on a huge scale, very quickly, very efficiently and thoroughly and accurately. That's what a quantum computer represents. And it's just basically having total control over the shamanic essay that's happening all over the world. Anytime some subtle action is happening, they get to describe what it means within their satanic dogma. Then they get to prove that so many people are bowing down to Satan, bowing down to their belief system of saying that everyone is agreeing to commit biblical sins, agreeing to enter into their rituals that they do upon people, enter into a certain mindset where they believe that human suffering is not real, and that it's perfectly fine to torture people alive, it's perfectly fine to rape corpses, to file corpses, and so forth. And that everyone is agreeing upon this because the broken images of Christian settings are floating around everywhere in the mass consciousness. They're all over the media and so forth. And that proves that people are okay with it. It proves that everyone is fine with it. But that's my interpretation of what a quantum computer is. And that's why I'm choosing just not to lend my attention and effort at learning intricate information to Western science. And I know I could probably be a complete laughingstock at this point for very intelligent people all over the world to assess what I'm saying and refute it with a very simple explanation. I know there are so many people prepared to refute what I'm saying all over the world and just write me off as a schizophrenic, write me off as somebody who's crazy, mentally ill, has a chemical imbalance in their brain, and so forth, because I have no proof that I have ever learned anything so thoroughly and to earn a degree, to earn some kind of credential that proves that I have a solid understanding of how anything works in this world. And I can't even, But what I want to say is that I just want people to understand how thoroughly people in the Western world are claiming that Western science has been around and has been adopted by everyone for such a long time. And that might be necessary in the first place if Satanists were originally people who were never using expensive technology to cause their agenda. If they were always just doing things the old-fashioned way, killing people, eating their corpses, and somehow superconducting the intelligence of the people that they kill through shamanic practices. And if all of that was unnecessary, then they can say that, people are completely dependent on Western science. People are completely self-absorbed because of Western science, and that's why their shamanic rituals don't work on people when they actually do something that terrible to someone. But I know if they can say that a shamanic ritual works on someone, then they can do subtle things to that person to make it look like a shamanic ritual worked on that person. And that would also be their agenda in proving that Western science has been perfected to such an accurate extent, just so perfectly that they know whatever technology they generate as a result is they can use to prove that they are the originators of the technology that has always saved humans in the first place. Because I'm pretty sure that any technology that I have ever studied, whether if I've ever studied how a nuclear power plant worked, if I've ever studied how microchips worked, and motherboards and any kind of electronic device, how it works, I'm pretty sure I wasn't learning a model of information that they wanted, that I wanted to learn. I'm learning a model of information that they wanted me to learn. Because I don't think it's advantageous for Satanists to allow me to learn intricate models of information. If I'm somebody they want to prove is always going to be affected by shamanic practices, because they're doing subtle things here and there to make it look like those practices are working. And then they can prove that technology, that they are the originators of technology that proves that shamanic practices will never work anywhere. And then they can prove that they allowed some individuals to use shamanic practices at some point in the future, and their shamanic practices still work because they're deliberately not using the technology that cancels out shamanic practices working right then. And in my mind, shamanic practices are just people being extremely eco-friendly, sitting around meditating all day, building an environment for themselves where their body and their mind are completely healthy. Maybe they are on an organic farm, and they're recycling the nutrients that they create from that organic farm, and they're putting it back into the soil in a way that never harms the soil. They're putting things in the earth that help the earth. I won't say that I know precisely what shamanic practices are at the simple person level. I wouldn't say that I know what indigenous people's practices are precisely, but I know it just involves, re-rendering, primary items from the earth, like, I don't know, rocks, grinding down specific rocks, or maybe seashells, and, putting it on your skin, or drinking herbal extracts, living in nature, eating specific things from nature, directly from nature, and so forth. And I know that it would have been advantageous for Satanists to prove that indigenous people's shamanic practices were working for them at some point in the future, when when the technology had already been created long ago that cancels out shamanic practices working in the first place. They would have allowed indigenous people somewhere to continue their shamanic practices for some time before they were completely canceled out, and they would say that the fake technology that they created, that they would have had those people like me to learn about, was the reason it was canceled out, and not because it was technology generated long before that person was born, before I was born, or any other people that they wanted to commit to shamanic practices were born, And I'm assuming that the technology that cancels out indigenous people being able to do shamanic practices and having them working was created long before I was born. And it was created under a premise that it probably would only become perfected from a poor person having to mitigate Satanists, being able to say that their own shamanic practices are working on them by that person doing any number of random things and just becoming extremely eco-friendly and living a life absorbed in holistic medicine, absorbed in holistic agriculture, just being the best citizen of Earth they can possibly be in a world where Western science has completely destroyed the Earth, polluted it, and caused a reason for people to want to revert to shamanic practices, indigenous people practices, the way they grew their food and took care of their health using primary items from the earth, plant extracts, mud, things that they can derive directly from the earth. So that's why I'm very sure that the whatever technology, if there are, because I don't know what that technology would look like, and I wouldn't want to describe it, but whatever technology, it has been saving humans for a very long time, and maybe it's the reason I am even coherent and capable of explaining how all of this happened. Maybe it's the reason I can learn English, I can learn math. I mean, I've learned math, and I've learned English, and I've even tried to learn, scientific process, scientific deduction in biology, and I've deliberately I've forgotten it, but maybe that technology, having existed before I was born, is the only reason I was able to learn, given that Satanists could say that the holistic genocide that they've done to people can actually make them mentally retarded, born mentally retarded. And then, they can prove that maybe all humans, maybe all inbred humans actually weren't going to be born retarded. Actually, are intelligent and capable of learning complex models of information because there was technology existing for a long time that helped inbred people, or people that they could say whose a physiology somehow causes them, the way humans reproduce themselves and rebuild their physiology was somehow going to make them be born mentally retarded, be born deformed, or be born in a way that they can't survive in a natural environment. can't survive, growing their own food, living in nature or something like that. And I know that if white colonizers had already perfected themselves, just exploiting the world the normal way, just eating just building themselves through shamanic practices or with modern technology, so that they can thoroughly claim to not have any reason to be mentally handicapped when they're born, or when they create other humans. Those humans aren't being born mentally handicapped. Then they're I'm pretty sure they can say that they're the originators of technology that does mitigate how humans are created, and how humans are likely to respond to their environments and build their own minds. Because at this point, it's debatable whether retarded people are actually retarded. Because in my mind, anytime I've seen someone that's mentally retarded, I don't know if what I'm seeing is authentic. Not in the way that I don't believe that they're not mentally retarded. I'm not believing that they aren't handicapped. I'm just believing that whatever I'm being shown about how their life unfolds, whatever I'm being shown about what's happening in their mind, things that I'm allowed to see about what's happening in their mind, based upon Satanists watching me watch that person, may or may not be authentic. I can't see into the mind of a mentally handicapped person and understand what they experience, because if I could do that accurately, and I could determine what I was seeing was accurate, then it probably wouldn't be advantageous for Satanists, because then they would be proving that their gigantic shamanic ritual against that is being used to christen their control over anti-racist technology, over technology that proves that there was universal input happening within the human race towards the creation of a modern society. They wouldn't want me, as someone of interest that they have, to be able to prove that mentally retarded people are not necessarily mentally retarded. They're completely cognizant of what's going on, and they're just someone that can't assimilate complex models of information that Western science has been attempting, that Satanists are attempting to make people learn, whether it's accurate, whether it's the models of information they want people to learn, or it's something that they're it's something that they're hiding. But I have no way of knowing whether. I'm not saying that all mentally challenged people are people who are choosing not to learn information, but in the Satanist dogma, they want to make it look like mentally retarded people are people who are deliberately choosing not to learn anything, and it's not advantageous for them to do that in the first place, and that's why they can prove that person is mentally retarded. Because I would say that in this day and age, it wouldn't, what I've seen mentally handicapped people go through, it doesn't seem like it's advantageous for that person to choose to be that way. Therefore, they're not choosing to be that way. Because a mentally retarded person's life, based on what I've seen, is not fun. Maybe they're wheelchair bound. Maybe they have to be fed. Maybe they have to be bathed. Maybe they're continuously, their mind is so continuously being bombarded with too much information, and it stresses them out. there's that's what I've seen mentally handicapped people go through. So it just seems like they get frustrated really easily. They get upset really easily. They may or may not be in pain all the time. They may or may not be in psychological stress all the time. And that's very sad to see if that is real. And I would hope that there is technology that stops people from having to live that kind of existence. But that's why I know it has already existed for a very long time. And it existed before I was born. And if what I understand about mental retardation is accurate, and I don't know if it is accurate, because I don't know if what I've seen has been authentic, if whatever technology humans used to perfect humans and make sure that they are all capable of existing in this world without much help, without much psychological stress, without much physical stress, then I don't know. I don't know if anyone that I've seen that is mentally retarded is just someone that they didn't use that technology on. And so it's like I'm watching a person from a long time ago, before that technology was created, and they're getting to prove that they're watching my consciousness watch that person. And it's like them watching humans interact within their satanic ritual that represents them having complete control over human history, having complete control over how human history unfolded hundreds of years ago or something. And then they're proving that they created technology that does this, that completely cancels out shamanic practices working at all or something. It's just a representation of them having complete control. And if they've always, if they wanted someone like me to prove that they've always had complete control, or to prove that they've never actually had complete control, they would need me to be born after they've already perfected their technology that cancels out shamanic practices, because at this point I'm a person that they would need to continuously use shamanic practices on myself and say that it's mitigating them doing their own simple shamanic rituals on me in Satanism. I wouldn't say what they do is very simple, and I wouldn't say that it isn't effective, at least at the psychological level, and probably in other ways that may or may not be noticeable. But I still believe that the whole purpose of Satanism is to just prove that they have complete control over the human race and how it creates itself with technology. And it's technology that people like me are never meant to understand, never meant to look at, never meant to learn about or ever know about. So that's all I'm going to say about this.